Welcome back to Tech, Tesla, and Trends. Tonight I thought I'd discuss the people we listen to, i.e. experts in industries. Those that are analysts or stock pickers, be they futurists, whatever they are, the prognosticators that we rely upon to give us a clue as to which direction things might go. In looking at this, it comes out to a simple thing. We have to have a way of measuring how accurate they are and how useful the information is that they are providing. And in this case, I'm no different. So the source of the advice is important because that advice, if they're coming from a position of reasoning by analogy, well, this is not possible because it's never happened in the past, or nobody's ever done that before. That same logic failed when it came to running a 4-minute mile. As soon as Roger Bannister crossed the 4-minute mile line, within a year, it had been shattered by so many people it was no longer considered impossible. But before that, it was, if a man runs that fast, he's going to have his lungs explode. I mean, some of the stupidness, the things that were said, the prattle that you might expect from the mainstream media of that day and era was absolutely farcical at best, and nothing more than pure BS in its current format. If we were to call it today, it would be crap. And that's the reality that we have to struggle with as we're looking at an awareness of trends. Is the source of our information reasoning by analogy, or some other faulty logic trick and bias? So it's important that we look at that it's based on clear logic, on math, and an awareness of curves. And by curves, I mean cost curves and also exponential curves and some other more specific ones, looking at Moore's law and some of those other things like that are factoring in to the conversation of where the future is going. So we have to be very cognizant that some people are simply ill-prepared to have that conversation or to make that prediction or call on the future. And looking at that, you have to then look at their track record. How close have they been? Are they remotely close, or are they, bat guano crazy and way the hell off in left field and not even in the actual playing field? Off in the corn, so to speak, if you were watching the Field of Dreams. But looking at some of those predictors, it was Bill Gates in 1994 that was saying, the internet, that thing, it's never going to have a lot of people on it. It's not made for commerce or any of those other things. It's just a tech thing. Yeah, great prediction, Bill. You nailed it. And that leads us to his CEO at the time was Steve Ballmer. I think he took over in the 2000s, but in 2007 he said of Apple, the Apple iPhone, that it will never take significant share from the computer because it's not sufficient. It's poorly powered, and you look at how well that aged. an iPhone in your pocket, and I'm not a fan of an iPhone, but I acknowledge very clearly that it is as powerful a computer as many that are out there on the market today. Capable so much so that some people never even buy a desktop or a laptop because they have an iPhone or they have an Android in their pocket. It's just changed the way that the world is. Steve totally missed that. Couldn't understand that the paradigm had changed, that the size of the processor and the capabilities of the bits and bytes that were being processed into wafers were more than he was going to be able to reckon with. Now, looking at another one of those brilliant predictors, and this is one that Tony Seba uses all the time, looking at the prediction that was made for AT&T by one of the then very well-known consulting firms. Consultants, they fall into that same category of, well, what's their track record? Oftentimes they don't have one. But in this case, the consultant said that AT&T would only have 900,000 subscribers by the year 2000. And this was in 95, I think it was. And, by the time their date came and went, it was off by 120%. It was 109 million subscribers. So, if you can't figure that out, and you're not capable of working through the details that enable at least a halfway decent projection, to be off by 120 times is almost inexcusable in some ways. As if you didn't figure out what clearly they didn't figure out the cost curves or any of the other technological trends that were occurring. Moore's Law didn't even enter into their cognitive track and explanation of why there would only be 900,000. So it's important that when we're looking at these advisors, that we are aware of where their bias and short-sightedness is. It's not something that many of us are accustomed to questioning. We just hear, oh, they're an expert in this or that. That I don't have to think about it. Wrong. Experts are questionable in any field. Now, some are able to totally hit the nail on the head every time or most of the time, and they build themselves a track record. Those individuals, it bears listening to what they have to say. You can understand what their logic is and follow the little bouncing ball, so to speak. One example of that is Tony Seba and his predictions from 2010 that solar, wind, and battery would become one of the dominant forms of energy generation and storage, and that it would be the most cost effective by 2020. It is. By 2020 or by 2016, solar was the cheapest form of generating power. And in 2022, the vast majority of new power projects that are going in are now solar or wind. So there is a massive shift that has occurred, and Tony Seba totally nailed it. He was spot on, and the reason he was spot on was cost curves. He understood what was going on. He looked at the trends and the math and the research that was occurring and all of the little nuances that are interwoven into the technology. And that matters. looking at your cost curve, coming back to that, because cost curves are tremendously important and often overlooked. One of the things that Tony and also Chamath have both said is that the cost of compute and of generation will drop to a near negligible amount, if not free, but almost free, essentially. And that'll happen by 2030. Now, you look at where we're at, and some of those predictions feel somewhat like, I don't know. But in looking at their track records, I have to at least consider the possibility that that is the case. And if that's the case, are we prepared for a world where the cost of generation is almost nothing and the cost of compute is almost nothing, and measured in teraflops rather than where they're at now? That will blow many people's minds, and they're not prepared for that level of radical change. If superpower does indeed come online, as Tony Seba predicts, the world is going to be a very different place when it comes to energy. And looking at, Ron Barron, he kind of famously was saying that Tesla should be able to make it to a profitable point, and also 10x by 2018. And if you look at where, the man's got some clout. And as you look at these details, you have to think about the people you're listening to. One of the most famous, almost always wrong folks is Gordon Johnson. And I don't know why he particularly makes those calls. It's only here in the last 4 months where he's even remotely looking like he's got any ounce of good call capability. And even at that, he's missing the fundamentals and cherry picks. And that's a particular logical flaw that is very troubling when it comes to the types of analysts we listen to. We have to be very logical in how we look at people that we listen to. So this is a big conversation, and I'll leave it at this point for now, but ultimately this awareness of trends really matters, and it is critical and fundamental to that bigger picture that I've talked about in the past with Elon's multidimensional thinking. And as we understand these trends, and we think about the processes and how those predictions come to pass, and follow the logic thread that the predictor is using, we have the potential to come to our own conclusion. And this, I think, is the most important thing. We need to come to our own conclusion. And, it's like the old saying, past performance is not an indicator of future performance. Well, there's some truth to that, especially when you're trying to prognosticate stock values. That's just, to me, that's, technical analysis is a highly questionable art, and it's one of those things that I have some questions about. And maybe that's due to my own ignorance on those particular processes. But right now, as I look at what a lot of them are doing, it's sure, it's coincidental at best. So for tonight, we'll call this good, and we'll revisit some of these points at a later date. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, and we can carry on and discuss what you think I nailed or what you think I got wrong, and some of your suggestions for things that we should be cognizant of as we're listening to experts. So, have a good night.